My name is Jake Parker, and I'm 28 years old. I live in a small apartment in the Lakeview neighborhood of Chicago, not too far from Wrigley Field. Most days, it feels like I'm just going through the motions. The daily grind of working a sales job at a tech company downtown, coming home to an empty apartment, watching some TV, and going to bed. Rinse and repeat. It's not that my life is bad, per se. I make decent money and get along well with my coworkers, but something has always felt missing, like I'm just drifting through life, watching from the sidelines instead of being an active participant. I've never really found that passion or purpose so many people seem to have. That all changed one unseasonably warm February day. Our company was hosting a booth at some corporate conference, trying to land new software clients. It was just another obligatory work event to drag myself through. Little did I know my whole world was about to be turned upside down. I was manning our booth, half-heartedly handing out branded pens and tote bags to anyone who awkwardly made eye contact. The drab gray convention hall felt like a prison, harsh fluorescent lights, cheap carpet, and dingy curtain walls. Just another day grinding it out in the corporate machine. That's when I spotted her across the room, and it was like someone finally injected some color into the scene. A bright red dress, golden curls that seemed to shimmer and bounce with each step. I could immediately tell this woman had a zest for life just based on the big smile stretched across her face and the spring in her step as she flitted around the hall. Before I could even register what I was doing, I found my feet carrying me across that dull convention floor. "Excuse me, miss?" I stammered out, almost sheepishly. The beautiful woman turned to me with a radiant smile that somehow instantly put me at ease. "I'm Jake. I couldn't help but notice you from across the room, and I had to introduce myself." I stuck out my hand. The woman took my hand firmly but not too aggressively in her delicate grip. "Well, it's wonderful to meet you, Jake. I'm Elizabeth Carson, but please call me Lizzie." Her voice was warm and melodic. "I'm actually just a lowly PA for one of the bigger companies here, but they make me put on a show for these stuffy events." I couldn't help but grin at her sarcastic self-deprecation. "Well, Lizzie, you're doing an amazing job at that. Certainly the most delightful thing to grace this place all week." Lizzie let out a bubbly laugh that immediately made me want to keep her smiling. "You're too kind, Jake. I was starting to think no one here had any semblance of a personality. It's so refreshing to meet someone who seems, normal." I chuckled along with her jovial presence. "Trust me, Lizzie, I'm about as normal as they come around these parts. Perhaps a bit too normal if we're being honest." We immediately fell into an effortless banter, riffing back and forth about the utter dullness of corporate conferences. I couldn't believe how comfortable and natural conversation felt with this total stranger. Within 10 minutes, Lizzie had me laughing harder than I had in months. Our chat eventually turned to safer small talk territory as Lizzie asked about where I'm from originally and what made me get into tech sales. I answered as briefly as possible, nothing too heavy or deep for a first meeting. I wanted to keep things light and fun between us. "Well, Jake, as delightful as this has been, I actually need to run and check in with my boss before he has an aneurysm," Lizzie lamented after glancing at her phone. "But I'd love to continue this another time, if you're interested." She gave me a little smile that made my heart flutter. I attempted to play it cool, but likely failed miserably. "Ah yeah, Lizzie, I'd really like that. Maybe we could go grab a drink or dinner sometime." "I'd love that," she beamed back at me. Pulling out her phone, Lizzie made a cute little concentrated face as she tapped out her number for me to save in my contacts. "There, now you have no excuses, mister." We said our goodbyes, and I couldn't stop grinning like an idiot as I watched Lizzie sashay off across that drab convention hall, the life of the party. I knew right then and there, this magnetic, vibrant woman was someone truly special that I needed to get to know better. Little did I know at the time just how much Lizzie Carson was about to turn my whole world upside down. Lizzie and I started dating not long after that fateful conference. Those first few giddy months were like a dream, the butterflies, the spark, the pure electricity anytime we were together. She brought this uncontainable spirit into my life that made me feel more alive than I had in years. The early days were a blissful whirlwind of new romance, nights staying up until the early morning just talking and cuddling, random adventures around the city trying new restaurants, and lots of unmistakable physical intimacy. Lizzie had this insatiable lust for life that I found intoxicating. She'd often spontaneously suggest we go crash some random bar's karaoke night or dive into the lake at 2 a.m. when no one was around. I'd follow her lead every time, caught up in the infectious energy she exuded. "Oh, come on, Jake. Don't be such a stick in the mud," Lizzie would tease in her sing-song voice, tugging at my arm. "When's the last time you did something actually fun and a little crazy?" I'd let out an exaggerated sigh, feigning disinterest. "I don't know, Lizzie. Skinny dipping in Lake Michigan doesn't really seem like my idea of a good time." She'd stick out her plump lower lip in an exaggerated pout. "Please, for me? You know you can't resist this face." Despite my moans of protest, I'd always give in. Half an hour later, we'd be stripping down and splashing into the frigid lake water together, Lizzie's shrieks and infectious laughter echoing across the deserted shoreline. Those spontaneous moments were worth a little brief discomfort to see her so thoroughly in her element, free, radiant, unself-conscious. Lizzie was beautiful inside and out, but also whip-smart and deeply caring. I loved how she always made a point to treat service staff with kindness and respect, leaving generous tips for our servers. She'd casually chide me if I ever forgot to hold the door or thanked the hostess. "Common decency isn't common enough these days, Jake," Lizzie would remind me. "We've got to be the change we want to see and lead by example." I'd just shake my head in amused admiration at her stubborn idealism. Lizzie had this strong moral compass, which felt like the perfect counterbalance to my tendency to sometimes get caught up in the little things and sweat the small stuff. Beyond her sunny disposition and good heart, Lizzie was ambitious and hard-working, determined to keep climbing the corporate ladder at her company. She worked as a personal assistant to the CEO, a demanding job that nonetheless came with great future opportunities. "I know it may seem like I'm just getting coffee and taking notes now," she'd tell me with a wry smile, "but in a few years' time, with the right moves and connections, I could be running the whole show. This is just an important stepping stone." I admired Lizzie's drive and clarity of vision when it came to her career ambitions. She knew exactly what she wanted and how she was going to get there. I couldn't help but feel a little twinge of envy at her focus and direction, traits I'd always lacked when it came to my own professional life. Those first few months of dating Lizzie, I was stupidly love-struck. She became my world. Suddenly, my drab little existence seemed to have a real spark and purpose to it, just from being near this radiant, life-giving force of nature. Though the rational part of my brain knew things couldn't possibly remain in that delirious honeymoon phase forever, I didn't care. For once in my life, I felt simply deliriously happy. As perfect as those first few months with Lizzie were, the cracks in our fairy-tale romance started showing around the 6-month mark. Her career began ramping up in a major way at her company, Henderson Industries. Lizzie had been promoted from personal assistant to executive assistant for the CEO, Michael Davies. It was an impressive step up that came with a lot more responsibilities and prestige, but also way more demands on her time and energy. Suddenly, my freewheeling, spontaneous girlfriend was a crew I hardly recognized. Lizzie was always tied to her phone, responding to another urgent email from Davies at all hours of the day and night. She was having to cancel plans with me more and more frequently to stay late at the office working on some big presentation or another make-or-break project her boss had dumped on her plate. "I'm so sorry, babe," Lizzie apologized for the 100th time, chewing on her lip anxiously. "Michael just sprung this new marketing rollout on me that has to be handled ASAP. I'm going to have to take a rain check on our date night." I tried to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Yeah, no, I get it. Work comes first, especially with this big promotion. We can just reschedule for this weekend instead." Lizzie shot me a grateful look before her eyes drifted back to her phone, already firing off emails. "You're the best, Jake. I'll make it up to you, I promise." But she didn't, or at least not in the way I was hoping. Pretty soon, our weekends were occupied by Lizzie working from home on her laptop for endless stretches of time, distracted and distant. Intimate moments grew few and far between as she was constantly on the clock. "Hey, can we just chill out in the living room and watch a movie?" I ventured one Saturday afternoon, resting my hand on Lizzie's tense shoulders as she furiously typed away. "I feel like we haven't just relaxed together in weeks." Lizzie blinked a few times, seeming to finally register my presence. She glanced regretfully at her laptop, piled high with papers and documents. I can't, Jake. I'm just completely swamped right now with getting everything ready for the Stratton meeting on Monday. Michael will kill me if this deck isn't perfect." I sighed heavily, feeling that familiar pang of rejection and trying not to take it personally. "Yeah, okay, yeah, no problem. I'll just go run some errands or something." As if on cue, Lizzie immediately turned her focus back to her laptop, her fingers flying furiously across the keys once more. I grabbed my coat and headed out before she could say anything else, not wanting her to see the hurt look on my face. I knew Lizzie's career was extremely important to her. She'd worked her ass off to score opportunities like this executive assistant role. A part of me felt like a selfish prick for even having a problem with her dedication and drive. This is what modern relationships are like for a lot of ambitious people, right? You make sacrifices and compromises, schedule be damned. But there was another softer, more insecure part of me that worried our relationship was taking a backseat to Lizzie's job in a big way. That her boss Davies was monopolizing all of her time and energy, leaving only scraps for me in the process. Maybe I was being irrational, but it felt like Davies was being a bit opportunistic in how much he was demanding of Lizzie's personal life. I tried to be supportive and give Lizzie her space to pursue this career opportunity she was so eager for. But it was hard, so damn hard, to be constantly making excuses and rationalizations for why my own girlfriend didn't seem to have any time for me anymore. Looking back, I should have spoken up more firmly instead of letting my emotions bottle up. If I had been just a little bit more assertive about getting quality time with Lizzie back then, maybe things wouldn't have unraveled the way they did. But I was a coward who didn't want to rock the boat, and I was hopelessly, pathetically in love with Lizzie. So I just kept tamping down my hurts and putting up with her increasing emotional distance, terrified of losing her completely. In retrospect, I was a fool, because eventually the other shoe dropped in a way I never could have seen coming, and by then, it was too late. The betrayal cut too deep to simply forgive and forget. I just wish I had paid more attention to those initial warning signs that my perfect dream girl might not be so perfect after all. Maybe then my world wouldn't have been shattered into a million pieces. Things finally came to a head one Friday evening, a few weeks later. I was determined to do something, anything, to try and rekindle the slowly dying flame between Lizzie and me. We were slipping away from each other more and more each day, and I could feel it in my bones. So after leaving work a couple hours early, I swung by our favorite little hole-in-the-wall Thai place to pick up Lizzie's favorite dishes. A small gesture, but one I hoped would show her I was making an effort. I even stopped and grabbed a bouquet of her favorite sunflowers from the corner mart. Maybe a surprise dinner date would help remind Lizzie of those earlier, happier times in our relationship before everything became about her job. My heart was beating with equal parts nervous anticipation and sadness as I pulled up to the sleek glass high-rise that housed Henderson Industries' corporate offices. Part of me feared Lizzie would just be annoyed and too buried under work to truly appreciate the surprise. But I had to try something, anything, to reinsert myself into her life before I lost her completely. The security guard raised an eyebrow as I entered the lobby, holding the takeout bags and bright yellow bouquet, but didn't give me any guff. I knew the bank of elevators for the top executive floors was around the corner to the right. I took a deep breath and started heading that way, my ratty Chuck Taylors squeaking on the polished marble. As I rounded the corner, muffled laughter echoed down the hallway and caused me to pause. That distinct, bubbly giggle was unmistakably Lizzie's. A small burst of hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe she was actually free and we could spontaneously have our date night after all. The light-hearted laughs seemed to be coming from just around the bend, so I poked my head around tentatively. That's when I saw it. Lizzie, dolled up in a slinky red cocktail dress, perched on the edge of the copy room counter as if it were a bar stool, and standing between her parted legs with his hands shamelessly roaming all over her body, was her boss, Michael Davies himself. I felt like I'd been dashed by a bucket of ice water. The Thai food and flowers tumbled from my hands, clattering and scattering across the marble in a cacophony that caused both Lizzie and Michael to turn towards me in shock. For a beat, everything seemed to freeze in a silent tableau. Then Lizzie opened her mouth as if to speak, her pretty face contorted in an anguished grimace. But I didn't want to hear a word of her excuses or explanations. Spinning on my heel, I booked it back down the hallway and out of that lobby without looking back, hot tears already stinging my eyes. Jake, wait. I could hear Lizzie's distinctive clicking heels chasing after me. Her hand suddenly gripped my arm like a vise, wrenching me around with surprising force to face her. What the hell, Jake? She was practically snarling, her face flushed and furious despite her own cheeks being streaked with smeared mascara trails. Why can't you ever just mind your own goddamn business for once? I blinked at her, utterly shell-shocked by the venom in her voice. This didn't even sound like my Lizzie. Your business? Are you kidding me right now? What about my business, Lizzie? We're supposedly dating. Or did you forget that little detail too? Lizzie opened her mouth to protest, but I was on a roll now, my hurt rapidly morphing into white-hot rage and indignation. No, save it. I'm so stupid. Of course you haven't forgotten. You've just decided your career and de facto other relationship with your scumbag boss comes before me and any respect you might have for our relationship. I could feel decades of repressed anger bubbling up as I finally snapped. You've been constantly putting me off, brushing me aside, blowing me off for months now, all for him. I jabbed an accusing finger back towards the office lobby. How long has this bullshit affair been going on, Lizzie? How many other times did you ditch me to go sneak off and screw your boss instead? Do you even care about me at all anymore, or am I just an inconvenient annoyance in your busy schedule? The words seemed to hang heavy in the air between us. Lizzie's mouth worked soundlessly as she struggled to find a response, hot tears spilling down her cheeks. For a moment, I felt a pang of regret at being so harsh. But no, she had betrayed me in such a visceral, humiliating way. If she was going to keep lying to me and cheating on me like this, at least I could finally purge all the hurts and frustrations I'd been bottling up for months. My voice dropped low, worried as the anger started receding in the face of soul-deep heartbreak. I don't know what I did to make you throw away what we had, Liz. I really don't. But I tried so hard to be understanding, to be supportive, to give you space and be there for you while you pursued your career. And this is how you repay me. I shook my head sadly, a rueful chuckle escaping my lips as I searched her beautiful, tear-stained face for any remaining trace of the woman I fell in love with. But hey, maybe that's on me. I should have seen the signs ages ago that your career ambitions were always going to come before me and this relationship. I really thought what we had was special, real, that you cared about me at least a fraction as much as you do about your success. Lizzie reached out, her slender fingers grazing my cheek, but I flinched away from her touch as though it had scorched me. I'd had enough of her lies and betrayals. Save it, Lizzie. We're done. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you again without feeling this same burning pit of anger and disgust in my stomach. Despite my harsh words, fat tears rolled down my cheeks as the reality crashed over me in waves. I really did love you once, but you killed that, and any future we might have had together. With that, I turned and walked out of Lizzie's life for good, leaving her behind to crumple against the cold marble alone. In the weeks after that fateful confrontation with Lizzie at her office, I felt numb, like my heart had been scooped out of my chest, leaving this empty, echoing void behind. All the anger, sadness, and disbelief churned inside me in a murky stew of pure emotional anguish. No matter how many times I replayed that nightmarish moment in my head, I still couldn't fully process it. The love of my life, the woman I had envisioned building a future and family with, had been cheating on me, with her smarmy boss, no less, in the most humiliating, devastating way possible. I drove myself crazy scoring my memories, analyzing every interaction with Lizzie over those final months for any sign, any clue I should have picked up on that she was being unfaithful. Was it the constant work excuses and late nights, her new aloof, distracted demeanor towards me, or had the betrayal started even earlier, with small flirtations and inappropriate work banter I had simply been too love-struck to notice? Part of me wanted to call or text Lizzie to demand answers and get the full truth ripped off like a band-aid, how long it had been going on, if she ever truly loved me, why she did this to me and to us. Another part knew that reopening those wounds would only lead to more hurt and anger. There was no good explanation that could possibly make her actions okay or give me true closure. So instead, I just sat with the trauma of it all. I'd come home from work each night and mechanically go through the motions, nuke a frozen meal, crack open a beer, put on whatever random TV show to try and numb my mind from reliving those agonizing moments on a loop. I was a zombie, simply existing in this blasé purgatory of emotional stasis rather than properly feeling and dealing with my very justifiable pain. It was my buddy Ryan who finally managed to yank me out of that rut a few weeks later. We've been best friends since freshman year of college, thick as thieves ever since, bonding over both being relatively reserved nerds from small Midwestern towns amidst the big city bustle of Chicago. Jesus, man, I'm starting to get really worried about you, Ryan said hesitantly one night as we shared a pitcher at our usual dive bar hangout. This isn't the Jake I know at all lately. You seem so empty. I shrugged listlessly, tracing the rim of my beer glass with my finger. What's there to be, Rye? Lizzie and I are done. As much as it hurts like hell, I have to accept that and move on. Ryan frowned, his thick brows furrowing above those dark eyes. Come on, Parker, don't give me that stoic lone wolf routine. I know you're dying inside after what that cheating bitch did to you. I shot him a warning look. As much as her actions had crushed me, I still bristled at someone insulting Lizzie so crassly. We had shared something real and profound before everything went to hell between us. At least I thought we did. I'm sorry, Ryan backtracked, throwing up his hands placatingly. That was harsh of me. I hate seeing you like this, dude. So morose and hopeless. That's not the Jake I know at all. Yeah, well, maybe the old Jake is gone for good, I grumbled, taking a morose sip of my beer. Hard to come back from having your heart and trust shattered into a million pieces like that. Ryan was quiet for a long moment before leaning across the battered tabletop towards me. Listen, man, I get that you're hurting in a big way right now. Anyone would be after being betrayed like that. But you can't let this one awful person and experience narfic every fiber of your being. That's letting Lizzie and all the pain she caused you win. I looked up at him sharply, not having considered it from that angle before. He continued, You're seriously one of the most resilient, stand-up guys I know, Jake. You've triumphed over adversity time and time again throughout the years I've known you. This situation is shitty, but it's not the end of the world for you as a person. You're going to rise up from these ashes like a phoenix and reclaim your old life. Just a wiser, battle-hardened version. And hey, a small smile tugged at the corner of Ryan's mouth. Maybe this is the kick in the pants you needed to get out of your comfort zone and take some more risks, both personally and professionally. Do something crazy like quit that soul-sucking sales job you hate to pursue your real passions. I couldn't help but huff out a small laugh, Ryan's infectious optimism finally penetrating my melancholy fog. Maybe he was right. Maybe this abrupt, traumatic severing from my comfortable life was a chance to totally reset and reinvent myself, to finally shed the passivity that had allowed Lizzie to walk all over me for her own professional interests. As I tossed back the last few swallows of my beer, determination started to well up inside me. The righteous anger and sense of self-worth I had tapped into during that awful confrontation with Lizzie were still there, just buried underneath layers of depression and hopelessness. But no more. If nothing else, I owed it to myself to climb out of this pit of misery and reclaim my identity as a man, flawed, but confident and self-respecting. I had given Lizzie chance after chance, and in the end she had discarded me in the most brutal fashion imaginable. Well, I wouldn't make that same mistake again of putting another person ahead of my own needs and self-preservation. From here on out, I was going to focus on getting back to prioritizing me, my goals, my happiness, my forward momentum. Lizzie might have torn my world asunder, but she wouldn't be the one to dictate whether I put the shattered pieces back together again. Only I could make that choice to rebuild myself from the ground up into a stronger, wiser version of the man I used to be before she set my life on fire. I would rise from these ashes forged in immense pain and heartbreak, and this time I wouldn't settle for anything less than the life I truly deserved. It's been about 6 months since that fateful day when my world completely imploded, since Lizzie's betrayal blew everything to pieces in the most brutal, humiliating way possible. Even now, I'll have random waves of anger, sadness, and disbelief wash over me when I least expect it. How could someone I loved so deeply, who I thought loved me back just as fiercely, do something so cruel and dishonest? What did I miss or overlook that should have tipped me off way earlier that our relationship was circling the drain? Could I have done something differently to make her respect me and our commitment more? Those sorts of haunting what-if questions constantly plague me, no matter how much I try to shut them out. I know it's unhealthy to keep torturing myself over events I can't change. Lizzie made her choices, and I have to accept that I'll likely never get the full truth or a satisfying explanation as to why she decided her career ambitions were more important than preserving our bond. Part of me still wants nothing more than to reach out and plead with her one last time to give us, another chance. There are days where all I can think about is her radiant smile, her infectious zest for life, the way her golden hair would shimmer in the sunlight. I miss the pure bliss of those early days when we were an unstoppable team, partners in crime ready to take on the world together. But then the white-hot flash of betrayal and humiliation always comes roaring back. The visceral image of Lizzie draped all over her smarmy boss in the most intimate way possible. The way she tried to lie and gaslight me, only folding to admit the truth when I'd already seen everything with my own eyes. Her angry tirade, practically spitting venom at me in the lobby for daring to catch her in her web of deceit. In those darkest moments, I know I could never truly regain the love and trust I once had for Lizzie. How could I possibly open myself back up to that level of vulnerability after having my heart shattered into such pieces? She may have been my dream girl at one point, but she morphed into someone practically unrecognizable by the end. Selfish, cold, and calculating in her pursuit of career success at any cost. As much as it destroyed me, maybe Lizzie did me a perverse favor by showing her true colors before we went any further down the road towards marriage or building a family together. If she was capable of such casual cruelty and deception at this stage of our relationship, who's to say how much further it could have devolved once we really became intertwined? I try to take solace in the fact that I won't be wasting any more precious time and energy on someone who didn't appreciate or respect the love I had for them. As agonizing as it's been, I'm slowly rediscovering my own self-worth and identity outside of being one half of a couple. I'm developing new hobbies that mashallow my reawakening passions, and putting more effort into nurturing my other important relationships with friends and family. More and more, I'm starting to look excitedly towards the future instead of remaining trapped in the past, rehashing all my heartbreak and pain over and over again. Maybe, just maybe, there's an incredible woman out there who will know how to appreciate the loyalty and care I'm capable of as a partner. If not, at least I'm finally remembering how to be comfortable basking in my own company and individuality. I'll always look back at what I shared with Lizzie with a bittersweet pang. Those blissful early days of discovery, the sheer electricity of our connection, showed me a glimpse of what true fairy tale love could feel like. But they were only that, a glimpse, a tantalizing tease of the depths of intimacy I'm now capable of sharing with someone who values that bond as much as I do. This brutal test of my emotional fortitude has equipped me with some invaluable wisdom about not losing myself in someone else, no matter how all-consuming that fiery passion may feel at first blush. Real love, I've learned, should elevate and empower both people as individuals, not tear them asunder or force them to fundamentally compromise who they are. So, while the echoes of my time with Lizzie will likely linger for a while more, I've finally reached the point where they no longer hold me hostage. I'm able to see what transpired between us with more clarity and perspective, the good, the bad, and the tragic. Maybe one day when the sting has faded even further, I'll be able to appreciate Lizzie for the life lesson she represented, even if she remains one of the most devastating experiences I've endured. But for now, the priority is firmly me, getting my own heart and mind fortified so that whenever I do opt to open myself up again in the future, it will be to someone worthy of the depths of love and commitment I'm capable of providing. Lizzie may have broken me for a while there, but she didn't destroy the essence of who I am, a devoted, compassionate partner who's also finally secure in himself. And really, knowing I was able to climb out of that emotional abyss and reclaim my identity is the most valuable gift Lizzie could have given me, even if that wasn't her intent. I don't know what the future may hold, but I do know I'm finally equipped to face it standing tall on my own 2 feet. The path stretches out before me, ripe with possibilities for growth, adventure, and maybe even that elusive, hard-won love that can weather any storm. Who's ready to see what comes next? This story really made me think about how even in our closest relationships, there are inherent risks of getting hurt or taken advantage of if we invest too blindly. What are your thoughts on the different forms betrayal can take and how to guard against it while still remaining open and vulnerable? Do you think Jake made any key mistakes that led him down this painful path with Lizzie? I'd love to hear the community's perspectives. Thanks as always for watching. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more compelling storytelling content. See you soon with a new exciting story.